Yeah, we'll probably lose. Well, if they're sitting at the back, usually my voice doesn't require much amplification, but just in case. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I think that's enough. All that, whatever it was I was doing. All right. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن والاه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Jazakallahu khairan for coming out tonight. I just wanted to do a little something that was going to give us something to reflect upon as we get ready, inshallah, to start the month of Ramadan and think about how we can make Ramadan better, not only just for ourselves on an individual level, but also how can we make it overall a better place. Just giving everybody the best possible, experience that we can have, inshallah. And I'm reminded, as I said today in the khutbah, that the predominant voice that the Quran speaks to us in is actually in the voice of the group or the plural. And that, a lot of times we tend to approach not only Ramadan, but so much of our Islam, in general, it's like a kind of personal Olympics. And so in the khutbah today, I had given the example that even an Olympic athlete does actually they don't get to where they're at just through merely their natural talent or even just through their pure athleticism, but they have to go through years of training. And part of that years of training is they get help from other people, right? I mean, they need coaches, they need trainers, they need all kinds of support people. And then usually, particularly, I mean, I'm just giving, I like doing sports analogies, so I'm just giving this as an analogy. But, if you are even at that level, right, you're going to the Olympics, you're usually on a team. So you have other teammates. And while in some ways there might be some friendly competition between you and your teammates, there's also that encouragement. وَفِي ذَلِكَ يَتَنَافَسِ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ, as Allah Ta'ala says, right, and Surah Al-Mutaffifin, that even the righteous people, they can compete with one another in terms of for hereafter. But within that is an understanding that it's a kind of competition that will really produce, friendly, it'll produce encouragement, right? So the whole point of me saying this is that we should seek a way to, not only of wanting to just show up and what do we get out of it, but what can we bring to it? And part of that is certainly just our overall demeanor of how we approach coming to the masjid. Are we coming here? Yes, of course, we're coming here to be obedient to Allah, to follow His commandment of wa'aqimus salah and establishing the prayer. But there should also, along with it, come a general spirit of camaraderie. And I'm reminded of this hadith again that I repeated earlier, but there's some debate about the veracity of the hadith. Imam Malik does include it in his Muwatta, even though some other scholars they rank it as mursal, but they include it in a lot of the books, the secondary books of hadith, because just the meaning of it is a good meaning, and it aligns generally with other hadith that can kind of corroborate the meaning. And so this hadith where the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, "Ash-shaytan yahummu bil-wahidi wal-ithnain," that essentially shaitan takes an interest and takes a serious interest in the individual or in just two people. And then we'll do the second part of the hadith in a minute. And what is it about this idea of why would shaitan take interest in just one person, right? Why would he, or in this case, the Prophet ﷺ is telling us that he takes a special kind of interest in individuals and in just two people. So one, the individual. When you're alone by yourself, it's easy to be controlled and influenced. And it's also hard to put a check on yourself. When you're alone and nobody, we think nobody's watching. I mean, Allah is always watching and the angels are always recording, but nonetheless, we could be duped into thinking, well, I'm alone, nobody's watching, and the whispering of shaitan can come to you and you can be led into doing something. And this makes a lot of sense in this hadith that shaitan yahumu bil wahid, right? Then also, interestingly, I said it takes place in between the two. I thought about this hadith a lot, that, okay, sure, you're by yourself and maybe shaitan will whisper to you to do something. But what is this also the two? Well, I think a lot about actually this kind of stuff, right? The tablet, the phone, right? When you're by yourself, but you've got this other device, you're not actually really alone, right? And the thing about this device, I mean, there's plenty of good things you could use. I mean, I love, watching certain programs or whatnot. I mean, it doesn't mean it has to be, evil. But nonetheless, what is commonplace for a lot of people to do? They get out their phone, they get out their tablet or whatever, they open Instagram, they whatever, and even if you aren't even looking at something inappropriate, sometimes, you can see, oh, wow, look at this beautiful place that I've never been to. Or look at these people, they went to Hajj, they went to Umrah, or they have this kind of car, or wow, they have this handbag, or they, you begin to this device, this screen, which is kind of like the second party, right? It winds up essentially becoming that second person, as shaitan yuhumu bil wahidi wal ithnain, right? The second person, where this device can become, and that's why it's interesting when you think about some of these statements of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that were made 1400 years ago, and how they would come back around again to have such a incredible insight on something that we would think, how would he know we would encounter? And nonetheless, this shows the sort of timeless wisdom, the timeless hikmah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, the screen can become your second person. The screen can also be, we see this happen too in our engagement with each other online. Like this morning, I had I'd made some posts yesterday criticizing atheism and secularism, and a young Muslim man contacted me this morning, and demanded that I answer his question yes or no. I'm like, man, I don't even know you from a can of paint, and yet this is how you start off a conversation, that you demand that I answer your question. And he said, yeah, yes or no. And then, I said, I don't really want to. I mean, one, I don't owe you an explanation for anything. Two, I usually don't like to give just simple yes or no answers, because a lot of things in life, particularly when it comes to a religious nature, are not just simple black and white. I mean, if they are, we don't need to discuss it. حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ لَحْمُ الْخِنْزِيرِ, right? Like if the Quran says, pork is haram for you, there's not even any need to discuss that, right? But generally, if you're asking the question of a religious nature, then, and it's not explicit in its being forbidden, usually in the nas, then we need to have a more nuanced conversation. So like, I just want a yes or no answer. And I said, I don't really want to give a yes or no answer. And literally, 2 lines later, the guy was like, you're a coward, and like just hurling these insults. And I was like, what happened to a yes or no answer? I thought you just wanted a yes or no answer. Now, what you're saying is, if I said yes and agreed with you, then I guess, maybe the conversation would be over. But now if I happen to disagree with you and said no, then all of a sudden the insults start to fly. And to be honest, this kind of interaction I see a lot online, because it's like we call those like keyboard mujahideen, like these keyboard warriors that all, behind a computer screen on, not face to face, suddenly you're going to talk to me in a way. Now, I have a feeling, I could be wrong, but this kid is young, if we probably were face to face, I don't think probably those words would have been coming out of his mouth face to face. I'm just guessing. And that there is something about this platform that does, he's probably not a bad guy in some ways, right? That's the influence of this thing, the shaitanic influence of it, that when you're just by yourself, or you think you're by yourself, but you have this thing, suddenly it's encouraging you to, hey, you saw the imam's comment and you maybe you didn't understand it, or you disagree with it. Hey, why don't you send him a message on Facebook and blast him or something? You know what I mean? Where does that suggestive impulse come from? As-shaytan yahumu bil-wahidi wal-ithnain. Shaitan takes an interest in the individual and in just those two. The second part of the hadith, it says, فَإِذَا كَانُوا ثَلَاثَةً لَمْ يَهُمَّ بِهِمْ. However, if there's 3 or more, right, then shaitan doesn't really take that much of an interest. And that's because it is a lot harder. I was saying, if you're by yourself and you come up with some harebrained scheme for something, right? Hey, man, I'm really short on money this month. I should go rob a bank, right? Maybe shaitan says, yeah, why don't you go rob a bank? It's like robbing the caravan, they're non-Muslim. It's just reappropriating funds, right? Maybe shaitan comes and whispers this, right? You're by yourself. And maybe if your other friend, because raju ala dini khalilihi, the Prophet ﷺ said a man is on the deen of his good friend. So a lot of times you'll have your other friend that's like, yeah, let's go rob a bank, right? Now, if you come to three people, usually that third person is like, nah, man, like I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to get caught. That's haram, so on, so on, so on, right? Usually by the time you get to number three, it's a lot harder to concoct a crazy plan or to do something disobedient, right? It's a lot harder for that. So going back to the beginning about this is why it's important to come. And as I said in the khutbah today, there's a reason why so many of us feel our iman rise during the month of Ramadan. I mean, part of it is Shahr Mubarak. It's a blessed month, undoubtedly. But the other part of it is you're being around other like-minded people. You're in a group of which, the general spirit is one of positivity. The general spirit is one of obeying Allah, loving Allah, worshiping Allah, following the Prophet ﷺ, and so on and so on. So when you come into that group, naturally your iman is going to kind of rise. So this is hopefully something that we can, just as a general spirit, try to bring to the community. So again, when you're by yourself and shaitan whispers you to be lazy, not to go to the masjid, right? When everybody is operating on that individual level, well, shaitan can just come and whisper to all of us individually, and therefore we do see a reduction in the people that generally tend to come to the masjid. However, if we perhaps outside of the masjid made an effort to socialize more, and I've had this when I was younger, I had this own experience. When I spent more of my time around Muslims, generally I was more inclined to do the masjid more. It's just how it was. Uh, yeah, sometimes we go play ball, sometimes we see a movie or whatnot, but generally, eventually at some point, going to the masjid is going to come up in conversation, and therefore that kept a lot of us. When sometimes people ask me, like, wow, you've been Muslim for 30 years, how did you deal with all of the challenge of, the temptation of the life that you used to live and the temptation that was constantly out there? And I said, for me, Allah's mercy manifested in me having good friends. I had good Muslim friends that we just kind of hung out and we kicked it a lot. And that's generally what kept us on the straight path, was just our association with one another. So if we spend time outside the masjid with one another, then it will also help to keep us in that group that is three or more, that will be less susceptible to the whispering of shaitan. And that again, also Allah Ta'ala says, talking about those people who, again, the group, what is this? And there's a number of hadith that talk about the blessed nature of the group. There is a hadith generally that's accepted about Yadallahi ma'al jama'ah, oh Yadallahi fawqa al-jama'ah, right? The hand of Allah is with the jama'ah, right? And that my ummah will not agree upon error. Similar to this, there's the verse in Surah Ash-Shura where Allah says, وَالَّذِينَ يَجْتَنِبُونَ, right? Those that make the effort to avoid kaba'ir al-itham. Those that make the effort to avoid the major sins. And sometimes I think, we're perfectionists. Sometimes as human beings, we are perfectionists, but there is no attainment of perfection. And what's interesting is the word that we often use for perfection, ihsan, actually doesn't mean perfection. Does anybody know the root of ihsan? The root of it comes from hasan. What does hasan generally mean? Good, right? So if it's ihsan, right, then it's just what? Better than good, right? Better than good, right? So we say something is ahsan, right? Just as Allah is akbar. We don't say Allah is the biggest, because we would have to know what that limit is. This is why we say Allahu Akbar, Allah is greater, right? I mean, we can say Allah is the greatest, okay, right? But there's a certain viewpoint or understanding that Islam is always trying to kind of coach us towards seeing, is that we say in our adhan, Allahu Akbar, because Allah is greater than anything else, always going to be on top, always going to be greater than. Similarly, we strive for ihsan, to be better than, but there is no perfection, meaning none of us are going to be able to achieve some state where we just don't make errors. It isn't going to happen. And the Quran knows this and reminds us of it. So, وَالَّذِينَ يَجْتَنِبُونَ كَبَائِرَ الْإِثْمِ وَالْفَوَاحِشِ. Those that strive to avoid what? The major sins and things that are especially repugnant. It's saying, however, you might make some small errors, right? If you keep your eye on the prize, as we say, of avoiding the major things and then seeking Allah's forgiveness and making tawbah for the minor things, right? That is a much more realistic, you could say, path to be on, because I don't know about you, but I know I will never be able to not make a mistake or even commit a sin. But if I can avoid the major sins, now again, looping back around, what's one of the methodologies, or what's one of the ways of avoiding major sins? Being around other decent, good, like-minded people and being in the group. Even if it's just the fact that I might have the desire to do something wrong, but I would be embarrassed to have other people know it. Now, you can question the intention of this all you want to, but this is part of human nature, that a lot of us sometimes have the urge or inclination, but you know what? I don't want to be known for doing that. That's actually a good thing. So Allah Ta'ala here is saying, if you're a part of the group, alladhina, if you're part of the group, that together you mutually encourage one another to avoid the major sins of life and things that are repugnant, but then also ties it in, وَإِذَا غَضَبُوا, and when they become angry, يَغْفِرُونَ, they forgive. Now, there's a very well-known hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he says, what? لَا تَغْضَبْ, don't get angry. But the Quran says what? وَإِذَا غَضَبُوا. So we have to have a comprehensive understanding that while the Prophet ﷺ, there's no contradiction here, right? The Prophet ﷺ is saying, don't get angry, because it's good advice. In ad-dina nasiha, right? Religion is good, sound advice. And the best advice, khayra nasiha Muhammad ﷺ, the best advice is the advice of the Prophet. He's giving us advice, don't get angry. But inevitably, that's simply not tenable. Something at some point will inevitably make us angry. And we may even get mad at one another. This is where, again, the Quran has such a merciful and broad encompassing of what it means to be a human. It says, when you get angry at one another, forgive one another. Which means that it's acknowledging that we will get mad at one another. That's something that's going to happen. It happens in families, it happens amongst friends. It's just a part of being a human being. But Allah Ta'ala says, what? وَإِذَا مَا غَضَبُوا what? هُمْ يَغْفِرُونَ. When they get mad, what? They forgive. They forgive one another. And we, of course, want to all be forgiven by Allah for whatever mistakes or sins we make, but then sometimes with one another, we are amazingly harsh. So when we talk about coming to the masjid, Ramadan, things we can build up, hopefully to go beyond, one of them is being easy with one another. Try, one, not to come just in an argumentative mood. It's not the place for argumentation. As a matter of fact, in the same surah just before this, Allah says, وَالَّذِينَ يُحَجُّونَ فِي اللَّهِ مِن بَعْدِ مَا اسْتَجِيبَ لَهُمْ حُجَّتُهُمْ دَاحِضَةٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ عَلَيْهِمْ غَضَبٌ وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ شَدِيدٌ. Those that argue about God, when it's already agreed upon that God exists, then they will have both the anger of Allah and a painful torment. Right? We should be taking this serious. This isn't only just about, between arguing between Muslim and non-Muslim. This is all, this is applicable to everybody. So try to avoid argumentation. Therefore, you will be in a much softer, gentler mood. And if it happens, because again, we can't rule out the possibility of these things. If it happens, then just forgive one another. Be easy and gentle. If somebody makes you mad, forgive them. And try to have a gentler understanding of what it means to be Muslim and also what it means to be a human being, and that neither one of these is demanding that we're living literally like fi sama ma'al malaika, like we're not in heaven with the angels, not yet anyway. Inshallah, we'll be there, but we're not there yet. So we have to make room for actually imperfection. The more that we can make room for imperfection, not that the ends justifies the means and that we try to make rights that are wrong and so on, but just realizing, look, it's human nature to err, and the Quran is even saying it. Therefore, try to be gentle and merciful with one another. So as we, approach this month, try to maybe have the mindset of, how can I make the experience not only for myself but for others better? So the last thing I'll say is that there's another wonderful narration from the Prophet ﷺ where he says, "I'budu rahmana wa afshu salama." Right? Worship the All Merciful. Worship Ar-Rahman. Right? This name is a very special name. Worship, it doesn't say "I'budu Allah." Right? I mean, it is who he's talking about, but the Prophet ﷺ in this case chose, instead of saying worship Allah, he says "I'budu Rahmana," right? Worship the most merciful, washu salama, and spread the salam. Now, this is not something that should only be done during the time of Ramadan. This is just something that we should generally have as a countenance about us, what we sometimes call adab, right? That we should give the salam, especially to those we know and those that we're not familiar with. And, come with that spirit of what I'm worshiping the most merciful. I want mercy upon me. Let me act merciful to other people. I want mercy in my life. I'm worshiping the most merciful. Let me just let things go, right? Trust me. We're all in a rush. يَسْتَعْجِلُونَ بِهَا الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِهَا. This is why this chapter in particular, the 42nd chapter is, the whole Quran is ajib, right? It's amazing. But in this chapter, Allah says what? Those that rush the hour, right, are only those who don't believe in it. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مُشْفِقُونَ مِنْهَا وَيَعْمَلُونَ أَنَّهَا الْحَقِّ. But those who believe in the hour are fearful of it, and they know that it's true. Meaning that don't be, life is short. We're all going to be in the dirt before you know it. And then we're all going to be standing in front of Allah before you know it. Even if we are in the ground for thousands of years, what does the Quran say? It's going to be as if you were in there for a day or part of a day. And then everything in our life will be gone over with a very fine-tooth comb, wahda wahda, one by one. So if we want to make that hisab, that account, as gentle as possible, try to conduct ourselves, and I counsel myself before you, to counsel ourselves with mercy and with gentleness and with forgiveness. And I have found, ironically, something very interesting amongst Muslims, that we tend to be very forgiving of a non-Muslim, which I'm not saying you can't be forgiving of non-Muslims, right? Because they're people too and they make mistakes. But we tend to be very, very, we're very soft and gentle and understanding But man, let a Muslim make a mistake. Let a Muslim commit a sin, and it's as if not only is that person immediately deemed just munafiq, like a hypocrite, but sometimes it goes to such an extent that it causes people to doubt their religion to begin with. Like, well, who are you worshiping? Are you worshiping people? Or are you Abud Rahmana Washuf Salama? Are you worshiping Allah, the most merciful, and are you spreading the salam? Where and what are you putting your faith in? If you put your faith in people, and we hear this today, it's a common, it's a common idiom that we hear. Oh, such and such restored my faith in humanity. I have no faith in humanity. And I mean that with all due respect. You're all beautiful people. But I have no faith in humanity. I only have faith in Allah. And that's where faith should be. And therefore, when I see people do things that people do, or do things that people do, right? Meaning that they do something wrong, they do something horrific. They're just doing what people do. And I don't put my faith in that. I don't put any stock in that. I either try to be, forgiving or, stand for justice or whatever that it is. We have to be careful of what kind of modern, idioms that we allow to sink into our subconscious, and then, suddenly it's really influencing the way that we understand Allah and the way we understand Islam. So to conclude, try to think again about being, how you can be forgiving of your fellow brothers and sisters. Being a human being is the hardest job everybody will ever have, and unfortunately, you cannot get fired from that job. Some jobs you can get fired from. Even if you're the president of the United States, you can get impeached. You cannot get impeached out of being a human being. It's just you and I are all stuck with it. But Allah Ta'ala is giving us the playbook and the kayfiyya and the methodology of how to go about being a human and how to go about being a Muslim. الذين يجتنبون كبائر الإثم والفواحش وإذا ما غضبوا هم يغفرون. Right? That we earnestly strive mutually and support each other and encourage each other to avoid major wrongs and repugnant things, and we're merciful with one another. So again, just as just wrapping up, there's that, and then again there was the hadith that is related by Imam Malik and his Muwatta that ash-shaytan yahummu bil wahidi wal ithnain, that shaitan takes a special interest in the isolated individual that can become prey to our own thoughts, our own anxieties, our own fears, our own depression, right? فَإِذَا كَانُوا ثَلَاثَةً, but however, if there's three, أَلَمْ يَهُمَّ بِهِمْ, that shaitan doesn't take any interest. Be part of the group. Be part of something, right? Don't just simply rely only on your individual talents. Otherwise, you will undoubtedly succumb to the difficulties of life, because life is an ibtila. Life is a test. لِنَبَلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, that Allah Ta'ala says what? We are going to test you with loss. Loss of what? Anfus. Mal. We're going to test you with loss of life, loss of wealth. We're going to test you with all of this, as the Quran says in another place, what? لِنَبَلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. Which one of you are best in good deeds? The seat of good deeds is faith in Allah. This is the seat of good deeds. But if you're by yourself, shaitan will definitely take a very special interest in you, and you will find it very, very difficult to maintain faith by yourself. I don't care who you are. And that, yes, there are times where it's important to have those little moments alone where you do your dhikr and your tadabbur and your contemplation and so on, right? I'm not saying that every moment of the day you got to be hanging around somebody, but I'm talking about just isolating yourself in general from the community. This is a bad move. You will no khair, as we say, no good will come from this. So, inshallah, we ask Allah Ta'ala to bless us in Sha'ban, in this blessed month as well. It's also one of the blessed months, and it's a great opportunity as we prepare, inshallah, for Ramadan to get ourselves together and not wait, right? Procrastination, right, doesn't really produce anything. So use the time now to try to cultivate that. So then when, inshallah, if we reach the month of Ramadan, we will be able to pick as much fruit from its tree as possible. Any questions before we take off, inshallah? Barakallah fiqh. So again, we ask Allah, nasallahu bil-afiyah, we ask Allah for well-being. ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا. Oh Allah, forgive us for our sins. وكفر عنا سيئاتنا. And forgive us for our evil deeds. واعف عنا. Pardon us. واجعلنا من أهل المغفرة. Make us from the people of forgiveness. واجعلنا من أهل التقوى. And make us from the people of piety. واجعلنا من أهل القرآن. And make us from the people of the Quran. وصلي وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين آمين. السلام عليكم.